Hi, welcome to Punchline Talks, the business breakfast briefers. I'm Mark Owen, and each week I invite a panel of business experts to review the morning newspapers, find out what's happened in their own individual business and their own individual business sectors, and finally, what's caught their eye in Punchline. But before we start, let's thank our fantastic sponsors, Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors, and we couldn't do the show without them. Anyway, we're ripping up the rule book today because this is actually my 150th episode. Over 28 months, we've carried some of the biggest news stories from across, well, the globe, and locally and nationally as well. So what I've done is I've asked my panel to pick out their top national news story over the past 28 months, and then their local newspaper news story over the last 28 months. And we'll be covering that over the next half hour. So let me introduce you to the panel. We've got Jon McGinty, he's the Chief Executive of Gloucester City Council. Ian Mean, Director of Business West and ex-editor of the Citizen Echo and Western Daily Press. Nigel Phillips, he's a fisherman, organic food producer and beekeeper. And finally, last not least, and always buzzing around, Sam Holliday, the Business Development Manager for the Federation of Small Business and the Bath Chronicle. And it took me a while to write that little script about the buzzing around, by the way. Okay, right, let's get going. So Sam, I know I've thrown you into the deep end this morning. Over the last 28 months, 150 episodes, 350 guests. What's been your top story over the years? We've had the Queen die, we've had the war in Ukraine, we've had the development of COVID vaccine, we've had 5 or 6 million prime ministers. But what's been the pick of your biggest story?
I think you've said them all there, really, haven't you? And there's probably more you could go to. But I think as a nation, for how we define ourselves, how we're seen on the world stage, I think the Queen dying trumps it all, really. I think the Queen's recognition throughout the world, she's probably the most famous person in the world. And I don't actually think that Prince Charles, King Charles, has got that tag yet. And I think that just goes to show how powerful she was as a figure, not only for us as part of our identity, and whether you're a Republican or not. I know people who don't like the monarchy that couldn't lay a glove on the Queen. You know, they couldn't criticize her. And I think to have somebody that's above politics, that represents a country and a commonwealth passing, it kind of made us all sit and think about who we were and what we did. So I think you could argue there's more important things that have happened. But in terms of our own self-identity as a country, it's got to be the Queen dying, I think.
Okay, right. Thanks ever so much for that. I'm going to go over to you, Ian, because you were there at the Queen's funeral. We saw you on national TV as well. Ian, what's the pick of the story over the last 28 months?
I agree with Sam, really. I was privileged to be at Westminster Abbey because I was also privileged to get an MBE in her last birthday honours list. And Sam is right. This is the most famous woman in the world. And actually look now what is happening to our monarchy. She was the steadying influence always, wasn't she? I feel very strongly that that's the main story, but I'd also say, combined with that, the outcome of COVID, and we might talk about that a bit longer later, in terms of people who are inactive for work, mental health, is an ongoing situation. So those two stories for me.
Okay, thank you very much. Jon, what's your pick of the past 28 months' biggest story?
Well, just for something different, Mark, I'll go for that time in September, October 2022, when we went through 3 prime ministers, or we had that crazy time that you look back on now and just can't believe, politics aside, quite what we did. You know, we elected a new prime minister. We had the sort of fall of the prime minister that had been elected at a general election, and we had the whole 43 days, the lettuce on the sun. We had the mini budget. We then had the Chancellor being summoned back on an emergency flight from America, which we haven't seen since the 70s. And I mean, you look back now at that 43-day period and you think, oh my goodness, you know, did this really happen in the UK? And it did. So for me, that was, you know, someone who works in the political organisation, quite an extraordinary time for this country.
It was like a tin pot government, really. You know, it was you know, some sort of third world African state, it seemed to be, where they change all the time. That's what, what
But
was
it was
going.
also so interesting to see the impact of the markets. The markets just said, we don't trust this budget, we don't trust this person. And you realise just quite how important the sort of markets are in the political world.
And they're still feeling the ramifications of that as well, aren't we? No,
Yeah.
thanks very much for that, John. Nigel, what's your pick of the last 28 months? What story would you say?
Well, mine really is the ongoing one regarding COVID and how it started and where it's going and what's happened since. Because I had a big birthday just when it started, and I went to a big party in Cheltenham, and we were thinking it hadn't really got going then because it was in March, and we were thinking, do we or don't we? Well, we actually went, and one of the people came up to me and said, "Oh, I'm just getting over COVID." And that really sort of impacted then. That was just, and after that, everything just went haywire, really. You couldn't do anything. We had to stop all our meetings for the club I'm part of. We couldn't go fishing, which was a big one for me and a lot of my companions as well, for about 6 months. So it impacted on the club as a whole. A lot of the members, because obviously we meet up for competitions, so that was out of the window. We had to redesign how we ran matches, how we did this, that, and the other. It was absolutely huge. I mean, a big competition, you're talking 400 and 500 anglers. So we had to try and do all that online, which was a bit of a nightmare, but we got around it.
I love the way you brought in fishing, actually, when
Well,
14 million people died and all the rest of it. Well, thanks so much.
Well,
So COVID for you, Nigel, is
massive. Yeah, massive. It
I
really
mean,
was.
talking about, the fishing in March and all the rest of it, it was the Cheltenham racecourse, wasn't it?
That's
And
right. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was.
should they have put it on? Should the rugby game
No.
take place in Wales? Shouldn't have. And I remember lots of people going to the racecourse, and I was invited to go to the racecourse, and I turned it down. And I know for a fact a whole stream of very prominent business people got seriously ill from it.
Yeah.
So COVID's for you. My top story of the past 28 months. I agree with the Queen. I agree with COVID. But actually, it's the war in Ukraine. I think it's fundamentally changed the shift and dynamics of Europe and power possibly across the world. Thankfully, we have Biden in power rather than Trump in power, but that's a different thing entirely. And I think it's not over, and it could escalate, and it could be far, far worse. So for me, it has to be the war in Ukraine. But the other stories, obviously, I totally agree with as well. Okay, well, that's very interesting. Thanks ever so much for that perspective. We're going to go into the last 28 months now of the biggest story here locally, business-wise, whatever. So this time I'm going to start with you, Ian. What's the biggest story over the last 28 months that you can pick out that resonates here in Gloucestershire?
Well, it's a story that you've been very involved in, and the continual development of Gloucester City, the Forge and whatever. I've been here, I came here to edit the Citizen 20 odd years ago. We then developed the Urban Regeneration Company, which looked at the docks and the quays, but, massive development in Gloucester City. At the time, the RDAs were suspended. We had no more funding, and we couldn't go into the city more to look at that development. But I think, there's been huge development. So I would say that's locally, extremely important.
Okay. John, I'm going to lead it back over to you then. Obviously, the Chief Executive of Gloucester City Council. What would be the biggest story for you over the last 28 months and for the City Council?
Well, I mean, for the city, I think Ian's right. The regeneration story of Gloucester is nationally amazing, I think. But if I'll pick a different story, I think the cyber attack on Gloucester City Council is getting a bit more sort of close to home. In December 21, literally rocked our world. All the employees, but not just the employees, the customers. We suddenly found ourselves with no IT systems, no access to our finance systems. We had 30,000 benefits to pay in 2 days' time. we suddenly found we couldn't do any planning applications, we couldn't do any land searches, which meant people couldn't move house in Gloucester. It was just traumatic time, I suppose. I mean, I don't want to make it too dramatic, but it was a very tough time, and the length of the recovery, the amount of time it takes to recover from an all-out, when you have to rebuild your entire IT network from scratch. You know, we had a council meeting last night where it was still commented that there was delay in production of our accounts, primarily because of the impact of the cyber incident, and having to re-input all of that financial data into a new system was just taking so long. So two and a bit years on, you know, we're still feeling the impacts of it.
No, without a shadow of a doubt. I think you guys have done a tremendous job, by the way. I know we were chasing you as well. I feel really guilty now that we were chasing you. We were chasing you for your accounts, because everybody else had done their accounts as a council, and we didn't have it from Gloucester City, but obviously we have them now. Thanks, John. Okay, Sam, what's been your biggest story over the last 20 months?
Well, a few threads actually put together, and not make it a very specific one, but I think it's the recovery from COVID. I mean, I think we've had this debate before when we were in the middle of COVID and we talked about this. If you'd have said how many businesses are going to survive this thing, I think it'd have been a very low percentage. But the reality is, and credit to the government, it doesn't always get it, but credit for the government for the furlough scheme, etc. So many businesses have survived and we're still in there with a fighting chance. Now, I'm not saying it's easy out there. It isn't. I've had 2 conversations in the last week with businesses that for very different reasons might be going under. So it's still tricky out there. But what COVID threw at the business community could have been a fatal blow. But a lot of businesses not only have survived, but a lot have prospered. And to prove it, we had our FSB Awards again recently, and I helped to judge it. I don't judge the local area, I judge elsewhere, but the range and quality of the businesses that are out there, it's quite exciting. You know, the business community has proved beyond proof that it's incredibly resilient. And when I talk to businesses now, they're having a few problems, I can just say, look, you got through COVID. If you can get through COVID, you've got a fighting chance of getting through this. It's not always the case. We know that some businesses inevitably will go under, but I think the recovery in Gloucestershire from COVID has been remarkable. For a lot of people, it's been difficult, and it will continue to be difficult. But I come back to my first point. Look at when it started, look at when it ended. We've got more businesses than we could have dreamed of happening. And then the final point Nigel mentioned about Cheltenham Golf Club, I watched it last night. I watched it last week on the TV, watching my money run away, and thinking it was that, wasn't it? It was that last event before COVID. There was a big Liverpool game as well. Ian probably remembers the European Cup game. And we were all sitting there thinking, you're almost feeling dirty. Should we be watching this? Should we be supporting this? Doesn't feel right. And after everything that went on, the amount of businesses that are left is really encouraging.
And also the government and the furlough scheme. And
it deserves credit for that. I think people forget that for a long period, Rishi Sunak was the most popular politician in this country.
Yes, and I met Rishi recently at King's Home, and one of the questions, I only was given 2 questions really, or 1 question, was who came up with the idea for the furlough scheme. I've always wondered where it came from. Right. And he did actually say it was a complete collective idea of the group of people within the room, because it wasn't done.
FSB was part of that. Yeah.
And so obviously, you know, they came up with this idea, because then they had to implement it really, really quickly.
It was the most generous in the world, Mark. I mean, in like America, it was terrible. Yeah. In Britain, it was the most generous scheme in the world.
And what was amazing is how many businesses actually topped it up as well, from the 85% to the extra 15%. And I know a lot of business leaders actually regretted that, because it did drain them of the finances as well. But they didn't need to. People were sitting at home not spending any money, you know. Anyway, thanks ever so much for that, gentlemen. Right, okay, I'm going to go over to you, Nigel, because we're going to kind of do something a little bit different here, because I'd like to talk about fishing. Because nobody knows anything about this big, massive fishing competition. Gloucester Canal is so well known for the fishing. So you are the secretary of Stroud Angling Club. Can you tell us, please, what is happening this weekend, how long it's been going for, and what's the overall involvement?
Right. Well, there's a big competition this weekend. People from all over the UK, teams of 5. You're talking Scotland, Ireland, Wales, Channel Islands, Army, Team Army, and also individual clubs as well. and a team from France. It might even be two, actually, I noticed yesterday. They come over to Gloucester to fish the Gloucester Canal it's called the Census Challenge. Now, it's to qualify to fish a big European final in France in the autumn. And this has been going on for the last 10, 15 years. And in angling, it's absolutely massive. You know, everybody's interested. All these guys come down, stay locally, which is quite, you know, it's quite good for local businesses, to say the least, because they do, you know, have a night out while they're down here, like for a week or more. They've been down practicing since Christmas. So again, they've come down, stayed overnight weekends just to practice. It's not big money. You're not talking thousands and thousands, because some competitions you're talking 20, 30, 40,000 pounds to the winner. This is nothing like that. It's just the prestige. It is such an important European competition.
So I just want to, sorry to be current here, right? But what kind of fish have we got in it's the canal, isn't it?
That's right. It's the canal. It's just ordinary coarse fish, if you like. It's bream, roach, perch, just perhaps the odd carp or two, eels. It's just, you know, it's the biggest way.
So how does it work then? So you've got all these fishermen along the bank. Because I've seen them lots and lots of times. I've often wondered what's going on. I've talked to them. Oh, it's very expensive. It's going to be very expensive. But how does it work? How do they weigh all the fish? Do they,
Yeah.
You know, so
all the fish, each angler's fish are weighed individually. You know, they weigh the fish, and it goes down on a sheet. And then at the end of the competition, they go back to the venue, to wherever is the main place being held. They tot up all the weights for all the individuals, all the weights for the different teams, and then it's all collated together to find the top individual and the top team. There's points involved for, you know, it's quite complicated. It's quite a big deal. And there are one or two computer programs now, because I've been involved with that as well. Because the big competitions that have been held in Gloucester last couple of years, you're talking up to 500 anglers. That's 50 teams of 10, plus all the ancillaries, plus the wives like to come down and go around the docks quite often as well. And they've all got to stay locally, you know, so it's just like this huge underlying business that nobody knows about. And I find it really strange. But then I suppose because I'm involved.
But
I mean,
this is the thing. This is what really struck me. So, Ian, you've been a journalist all these times, and Sam obviously as well. Have you ever heard of this?
Well, I'm a fisherman going back to the 60s. I used to go match fishing. I've still got a reel I bought on the Never Never when I did paper rounds. An Alcock's aerial, Nigel, you know those.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, that's worth a lot of money.
And I must talk to you because I need to get back into fishing. But I mean, I had a look when I knew you were on, and the 1937 All England Championships on the Gloucester and Berkeley Canal.
That's right.
September 1937.
Yeah.
That goes back to.
Yeah.
And I remember, Nigel, when I was a young lad, my Bible was not newspapers, it was the Angling Times.
Angling Times, yeah. About
great match anglers like Ivan Marks, Billy Lane from Coventry, Benny Ashurst from Wigan. And I must talk to you. But this, Mark, is a huge business. It is an absolutely massive business. And the tackle shops, there's a quoted company, Nigel, I can't remember what it is now, the big one, that's doing marvellously well. And it's a great sport for young people. It gets them out in the air. It's discipline, fantastic. And I shall go along at the weekend.
I was going to say, in COVID, of course, it is one of those sports that did actually take off afterwards, wasn't it, as well? And I didn't realise that some of the rods are £1,000 to £5,000. Oh. Serious bit of business, isn't it?
The poles, the fiberglass poles, right? I haven't got a pole, but I mean, pay up to $5,000 for those things.
Yeah, it's all carbon fiber now. It's high-tech carbon fiber.
Yeah.
It's like massive. Yeah.
Also, Nigel, the canal's quite deep, isn't it? Because when the tall ships come in, the draft is quite deep, and it's quite the depth. Is it 12, 14 feet?
Yes, well, I think the maximum is 15 feet along the main stretch of the canal. But of course, the docks get silted up from the pumping of water for Bristol Waterworks down at Purton. So, it is. It's like, it's a one-off. And the Continentals, the French, love it. Because
Why do they love it so much, Nigel? I don't get it.
it's the sort of canals they have in France where they hold like the World Championships. I mean, the reality is the Gloucester Canal in the whole of the UK is one of the few places that could actually host a World Championships if we had the structure, stuff like that. It would be absolutely out of this world.
Well,
Nigel, when I was at the Daily Mirror, we got involved with Barry Hearn, the boxing promoter, in Fishermania.
Yeah, that's right.
Top prize, and this was 20 odd years ago, was £20,000-30,000 to the winner.
So maybe sorry to stop you here.
Business.
Maybe we stop here, but John, maybe this might be a festival for Gloucester. Solve the Tall Ships Festival. Maybe we're missing a trick, mate.
Yeah.
Well, John, can I just interrupt there, because Evesham hold a fishing festival every year on the Avon at Evesham, and they calculated a few years ago it was bringing over 30,000 visitors to the town every bank holiday Monday.
Wow,
good idea.
I mean, I've been here for 8 years, Mark, and that I didn't know, but I mean, I saw all the anglers, but as I drove in the other day and I along the canal, and I was thinking, what are they all doing? There's quite a lot of people there. And when you told me what this was all about, I'm going to mention it to my destination marketing team, because
there you go.
It's possibly the next big festival for Gloucester. Yeah.
I think it really
Punchline Fishing Festival, Mark.
Love
See
it.
it now. I can see it now.
See it now. Sponsorship on its way. Okay, we're kind of running out of time, guys. So I just want to pick out the story of the news. Actually, we go back to that little chest. No, I don't think we'll bother with that. Should we bother with that? No, let's not. Just very quickly, Sam, what kind of week? Let's talk about the general week for business, and we'll go around to each of you, okay? Because obviously, John, as well, you got an announcement from last night. We had a big cabinet meeting, wasn't it? Sam, for you, what's been what's the general overview of the business? You just said about companies going bust.
Yeah, I mean, do you know what? And I think we probably all experienced this in our roles. Every week's different in this job, and I have had a couple of calls this week. I've got one afterwards with a Bristol company, not a local company, that is also talking about going bust. They've got problems with the business rates. I'm talking about the valuation office, and etc., etc. I have a slight feeling, and I'm always a bit cautious to say this, but things may be changing in a positive sense. Although I've just said that about some negative conversations I've had, I'm seeing less people worrying about energy. I'm seeing less people worrying about recruitment. I'm seeing less people worried about inflation and interest rates. And there is a sense that, although there's a political uncertainty at the moment, what's going to happen with the election, that maybe this could be the year that things start to turn. So I'm trying to stay as positive as I can, because we've had so many negatives over the previous years, but that's not to take away from the fact that some businesses are still struggling. So,
Sam, are you trying to say that Rishi's plan is working?
I'm not trying to say anything of the sort. Can I say one thing, by the way? Can I say one thing about?
He told me 3 times it's working, mate.
No, one thing about about politics, which I found interesting, which I would have said if we were going to do the papers. There's a story on the front of the Times today about a Labour frontbencher called Fiona Wilson, who is only known by 47% of the public, but 15% think that are favourable about her. She doesn't exist. And she was put in a poll of names just to see if people really do know any politicians, and 47% of people recognise Fiona Wilson, who doesn't exist. And I think it says a lot about the fact that a lot of people are very politically disengaged now. I think 20, 30 years ago, even those that didn't like politics tended to know who was in the cabinet, who the Home Secretary was, who the Foreign Secretary was, but we've got to the point where politicians become more and more anonymous, and I think that's a real threat to democracy. So I just thought it's a funny story, but with a really serious underlining thing about it. So I thought I'd throw that in there.
No, okay, that's good. I think that's really interesting. Let's carry on with the Nationals then. Ian, what have you picked out then? We've only got a couple of minutes left, guys. So just
yeah, there is our latest quarterly survey, Mark, is saying there's a bit more confidence in the game. And if you look at the papers this morning, Simon Wolfson, Lord Wolfson of Next, is actually saying we're turning the corner. He uses the word new era. I'd say also, though, have a look at the Times as their lead story. 1 million more people cite mental health battle. The biggest issue to me at the moment is the whole business of inactive people who can't work for some reason. this story is quoting mental health here, but it is a huge problem.
Yeah,
We've got so many, and Gloucestershire is particularly affected by this.
and it's funny, there's a story, I think it was the Telegraph yesterday, that said about mental health, that actually they were saying a lot of it is sort of everyday anxiety. You know, you haven't got a mental health problem, you're just worried about a meeting, or you know, you've fallen out with a friend, or you're thinking about it a lot. That's not a mental health problem, it's just life. Thanks, Ian. That's really interesting. John, what about yourself? What have you picked out from the sort of national broad church stuff going
I
on?
mean, I also picked up that next boss talking about the new era, because it's unusual to hear sort of such positive news from the retail side. And you know, they're talking about £1 billion annual profit. What's quite interesting, I think, about the next story is they've managed to blend the online and the bricks and mortar retail businesses in a way that many other businesses have struggled to do. And I think that's what he's sort of highlighting is his success. And the other thing that they were saying in this article is that one of the keys of their success is they're almost becoming the new department store. You know, we've seen the decline of the Debenhams and what have you, but what they've started to find now in the next store is that brands like Jules and Fat Face and Reese and are starting to take concessions in the next stores and to try new products and do things like this. So they seem to have you know, really cleverly worked out how to make that connect, and they own their own sort of online platform, and they seem to have made that online and face-to-face retail business really work successfully, which is great news for certainly in Gloucester in the Peel Centre.
And it's funny you should say that Marks and Spencers have done the same, having multiple brands. I was talking to someone the other day, and I don't want to say which centre it was, but they were saying that footfall was down 7% over this last quarter, which is quite last month, sorry, which is quite a steep fall. So I'll be very interested to talk to a few others what's happening in the marketplace. But who knows? It's so volatile at the moment. But I do feel there is optimism out there as well. Nigel, what have you picked out very quickly? Have you got a story from the Nationals for us?
Well, mine really is the ongoing one regarding, I suppose, pollution, not just from, if you like, my fishing point of view, but I started off in farming many years ago, and we never appeared to have this problem to the degree it is now with runoff from farmland, etc. But we farmed differently then. Farmers ploughed the fields, and you know, so every year they were ploughed. Crops were undersown, which meant grass was sown underneath like wheat and barley, so it held the water and held the nutrients over winter. Now a lot of fields are just left bare and it just runs off. It's, you know, we've just lost. I don't know what it is. You know, perhaps it's just me, my age. I don't know, but I feel we seem to have lost the plot a bit as far as looking after the environment and the fields and everything is concerned. I think you've got to start from basics, really. I mean, what's it costing the water companies to treat this water, this drinking water, really, when you think of what's going into the rivers? And it's like the Gloucester Canal. We spoke about the Gloucester Canal. You've got to realise that there's Netheridge sewage works. Now, I'm not knocking them, but they send their treated sewage into the River Severn. Now, at times of high tide, that is shuttled backwards and forwards between, if you like, the sewage treatment works up as far as almost Tewkesbury. So it's pushed all the way back up, then it comes back, then it's pushed up and it comes back twice a day. And the water in the Gloucester Canal takes its water from the River Severn. Well, how much of that is, if you like, treated sewage, and how treated is it? Which means that Bristol Waterworks down at Purton have to treat that water before they feed it into the people of Bristol. You know, it seems ridiculous to me. I don't know.
Okay, well, thanks ever so much. Very interesting. Great, guys. We're going to pick out the story from this week's punchline, please. What's the pick of the punchline? We've got 1 minute each, max. Okay, I'm going to start with you, John, this time. What have you picked out for us, sir?
I'm going to focus on charities. You did a story about Music Works. It's Big Give Week, and Music Works are trying to raise money to get more young people into music. Also, Strike a Light, another great charity, are doing that. But also on the sort of more worrying news, the Brinscombe Community Hub is facing closure, and this I live quite close to that, and there are some amazing businesses there. It's got a cafe, it's got bread, it's got a bike repair shop. It's got things to do for kids, and their landlord's given them notice. So anyone in the Brinscombe area that can find a new home for them, do please get in touch with them, because they're a great cause. The Long Table are based there, and it would be great to see them rehome somewhere nearby.
No, great story. Okay, thanks ever so much for that. Sam, what have you picked out for us, please?
Well, I was going to mention the Music Works as well, because I love the Music Works. Any excuse to plug it. It's a great facility for Gloucester. But going across the Gloucester border, if you like, I was pleased to see the success of the Cheltenham Ice Rink and the extra revenue that's brought into the town over there. Gloucester's got one as well, and it goes to show a little bit what Nigel was saying about the impact of all these anglers coming from outside the area. You put these events on, it doesn't just help the people running the events, it helps all of the businesses. Because if I went to Cheltenham for the ice rink, I'm not just going to stay there. I'm going to look in the shops around there. I'm going to make pop to the pubs. Exactly the same with the Cheltenham Gloucester ice rink. Exactly the same with the anglers. So the more external events we can put on, the more we can showcase our county to the country.
Okay, thanks very much, Nigel. I'm going to go with you, and I'm going to finish off with Ian.
Right. Well, my thing really was you about the new business organisation regeneration for the city. Excuse me, because we've had a lot of them over the years, and some of them have been moderately successful. You know, but I'm just interested, because I suppose as a Gloucester person, I like to see it on the up. You know, I've seen it change from 1950s to today, and I mean it's immense. But we still need that investment in the city to drive business forward. I suppose in my previous life in employment, I was heavily involved, if you like, in business. So I got to know virtually all the businesses in Gloucestershire especially. And I was always fascinated by, if you like, the entrepreneurship, the ideas some people came up with. And with a bit of help and assistance, it can really regenerate the whole area, I feel.
Okay,
So we need more of that.
Thanks ever so much for that. So that's the demise of G First LEP and the new organisation that's taken its place. Ian, what have you picked out for us, please?
Well, two things really. First, the whole Unilever situation. Did we realise that that was such a big producer of ice cream in the UK? I certainly didn't. It's an amazing place to go around. And second thing is you're 150. Now, in a changing media climate, which is very, very difficult, you've done brilliantly. And I love the way that you pushed in front of Rishi Sunak your Punchline magazine, which was great. This is the sort of stuff that we used to do in newspapers. Have a go, hold people to account, make them look good and make them look silly sometimes. So my sort of thanks to you on behalf of everyone for doing a great job, and 150 and counting.
Well, thank you very much, Ian. That's very, very kind of you. And you know what? I've enjoyed every single, well, apart from one, I had a hangover when I went to the Business Awards one year and a bit too much wine and getting about 5 in the morning nearly finished me. But that's very kind. I have met some fantastic people along this journey, and I'd like to thank every single one of our guests who have taken the time out to talk about their business, to open their hearts to us, to review the papers. And we have such an amazing county that I think we'd all agree we're very fortunate to be involved with as well. And that's all we've got time for today. If you like the show, please like, share and subscribe. And once again, I'd like to thank our fantastic sponsors, Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors. And remember, it's all in the punchline. Bye.
Bye.